Joining me now is research fellow at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Veysi Dag. Welcome.
Thank you, Conrad, very much for having me.
Good to see you. So, my first question would be, what's happening in Syria these days that we in Scandinavia don't know? But first, maybe a little bit more about yourself. You are a Kurd yourself,
Yes, I'm of
and
Kurdish.
and you are living in Jerusalem.
Correct,
how
yes.
how did it how did this happen?
I mean, I'm a German researcher of Kurdish origin, and I have lived in Jerusalem for almost 4.5 years. And as a Kurd, Jerusalem is crucial for all of us, Israel, and I mean in general, but also as researcher. And I work on the Jews from Kurdistan, and this is a subject that has not been studied well. And this is, despite the fact that the Jews from Kurdistan are extremely kind of engaged and well identified, emphasize the Kurdish identity, and they are part of, like, let's say, they are bridge between the Jewish and Kurdish societies. They are part of the Kurdish nation, but they are also part of the Jewish nation,
Yeah,
so society, and that's why Israeli society. So, and that connects both. And I thought it's that's something that need to be explored, and that's why I moved to Jerusalem and I left. I live there and I feel at home. For the first time, I've been living abroad for over 20, almost 30 years, I would say.
hmm,
But for the first time, I feel at home in Jerusalem because I get that, you know, that's the sense of belonging, the feeling that I'm part of the community, which is very important. Yeah.
very nice. Yeah. So last year the Assad regime fell after Israel military conquered Hezbollah, and I know that Turkish intelligence forces were involved in the takeover of Syria. Maybe you could speak to what degree they were involved, and what how they are involved even today.
It's a very important question. And I think in order to understand the crisis in Syria, we have to definitely pay attention to the Turkish role.
Hmm.
And Turkey, Erdogan regime has been involved in Syria. It's not just since um, December 8th, 2024, when the Bashar Assad regime fell. Turkey has been involved since the beginning of the, let's say, civil war 2011, and the Turkey heavily invested in Syria, heavily invested in jihadist group. Like at that time Al Nusra, Al Qaeda, but also many element of ISIS, and there were many reports how Turkey smuggled fighters, weapon, provide them with weapon, recruited them, and Turkey was a kind of transit, like all over the jihadists from all over the world. They could enter Syria, like we Turkey, and Turkey provided them the support, enabled them to actually, even the some in many sorry, at many in many cases Turkey transported them from Istanbul's airport to Syria border so that they can join all these radical groups, and also weapon. We have reportedly seen how many how often Turkey invested, provided this jihadist kind of with weapon, and in order to fight against Bashar regime. We should not forget that Bashar and Erdogan were good friends. I mean, with the wife, they went on holiday together. But then Erdogan had his own agenda and what he wanted from Bashar. Probably they had different interests. But anyways, Erdogan invested in all this kind of jihadists who actually caused bloodshed, and who became extremely powerful. So Turkey has been invested, and even Turkey created a Syrian Free Army. Most of them are kind of jihadists from all over the world, from
Hmm.
from Afghanistan, Chechenistan, many Turkish from the Turkish society. So, and most of these people are kind of from Arab countries, from abroad. Even we call it foreign fighter, jihadist, and this is like the kind of informal, let's say, army, direct army proxy of the Turkish state. And so since 2011, Turkey has been investing in Syria, and so until the supported them and so on, until the Bashar fell, and the Turkey, actually we have to understand that the Syria is a Turkish project. Turkey invested in this project, and even Al-Shara in Damascus today, who was also first the member of Al Qaeda, he joined the ISIS, then he joined Al Nusra, and now he has Hayat al Tahrir al Sham, which is the same, the same, actually belongs to the same school, maybe different interpretation. So, and he is now the president. And by the way, before I just elaborate on that, we have to understand that Erdogan followed the same, let's say, Islamic school as ISIS, as Al Qaeda, as Al Nusra, which all actually, feel like attached to Muslim Brotherhood
Mm-hmm.
ideology. I mean, same school, but the different interpretation. So, I mean, this is very important, and this is something. This is the Erdogan's world view, Islamic, very radical, and thus, and Syria is part of this world view. How to establish a kind of, this. Let's say like Mullah, let's Ummah model, which was the model, the system of the Ottoman Empire,
Mm-hmm.
based on the Sunni Muslim, excluding all other communities. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what Turkey is. This is the Turkish vision, and Al Shara in Damascus, a part as part of this vision. And actually, he without Turkey, even without Turkey, Al Shara does not exist. Damascus does not exist at all. The regime does not exist. Even recently, they signed a pact that the even will that the Turkey will train the Syrian army, which does not exist as normal army, which, let's say, jihadist army. So, and
Mm-hmm.
now the this jihadists, they try to eliminate, under the patronage of Turkey, eliminate all other communities which are minoritized communities. We have
Mm-hmm.
seen at the west coast in Syria when Alawites were kind of massacred. We recently seen in Sueda area when Druzi were massacred. They had many attempts to commit massacre against the Kurds in the north, and for them there's no any, what they want, just to establish a kind of uh, homogenized Sunni based model, and other,
Mm-hmm.
uh, where everyone who are loyal to this vision are welcome. The rest of people should be eliminated. And we have to also bring up that the all these jihadists are also extremely anti-Semitic, anti-Israel. We have recently seen in Damascus when many of them, like last week, even demonstrated, and they shout death to Jews, death to Israel, despite the fact that Shara tried to, recognize Israel and talk about normalization, but actually they have the vision, which is to also target Jerusalem. That is the end goal, to
Mm-hmm.
in order to free Al Aqsa in the view. And we have also, I have listened to a voice recording of Al Shara himself, which was circulated on social media platform, when he said that end goal is to liberate Al Aqsa, and this is the
So,
vision.
so, so, what should we make then of the rumors that there may be normalization between al-Shara's regime and Israel? Do you think it is? Can he use a connection to Israel to kind of break free from too much Turkish influence, or what? What's the thinking you think behind talks about normalization?
I said I don't. I mean, there's no, in my opinion, it's impossible to have normalization with the jihadist regime, which is a part of the, let's say, the Erdogan regime,
Mm-hmm.
representing Erdogan regime, and they have the vision to establish a kind of Islamic model in the Middle East. And in my opinion, the Al Shara used this normalization discourse as kind of excuse to actually gain legitimacy in Europe and recognition, but also to get the support. And this is, but otherwise, I don't think that Al Shara will have the will, and whether he. I mean, I don't even question whether he will or not, because he will not, definitely, because he doesn't have the free will. He is, whatever he hears from Ankara, he implements, in my opinion, in the in in Damascus, in the region, and without Ankara, that even recently, as I said, they have the pact, but also he sent all of his, let's say, kind of military elites, jihadists, former jihadists to Ankara, to
Mm.
get the order. And on daily basis, there's the communication, and every few days, like the Turkish foreign minister, or the head of the intelligence, they visit Damascus, or they invite the element from his regime to Ankara to actually to plan how to move forward. And
Mm.
that's why, I mean, this normalization, how can jihadists who actually committed genocides after genocide will recognize all this kind of pluralistic communities in Syria, recognize Israel, a Jewish community, which they even curse in the Quran. I mean, it doesn't make that much sense, but certainly what they do, they try to gain more time, gain more
Mm.
legitimacy in
Mm.
order to move forward with this very dangerous model that actually deny everyone else apart from the people who are loyal to this Islamic, let's say, pan-Arabist, pan-Sunni Islamic vision that they try to establish in Syria.
So you were saying that or many of these groups and the Turkish regime, they are inspired by the Muslim Brotherhood, but I and I often wondered about that because the Muslim Brotherhood started in the 1920s, isn't it, in Egypt,
Yes.
and and the ideology has spread quite widespread within the Islamic world. I'm just curious that, I mean, this idea has gone so much viral in so many places. So I'm just wondering if it's does it really did it really start before 1920, or what made it so viral within the Islamic world, you think?
I mean, this is kind of politicization of Islam
Mhm.
in a way that actually follow some, let's say, follow a kind of agenda which is embraced by all these powerful leaders movement.
Mhm.
I mean, it's kind of movement that is very much focused on grassroots, and they have resources, how they actually recruit and mobilize people. But we have seen this kind of vision as well, the politicization of Islam, which does not actually, which is a kind of threat to anyone else. All this kind of, ideologies. Of course, it's not new. The movement itself, maybe yes, the establishment is maybe, let's say, it has a certain time a period of history, but this is also the roots of Islam. Actually, it's kind of uh, very harsh, and it has kind of ambition always to colonize. It has a
Mhm.
imperialistic ambition,
Yeah.
expansion, to expand
Mhm.
all over. And this is also, we know, this is the nature of Islam itself, how it's actually, how it became kind of very mainstream religion. But
Mhm.
now with the Muslim Brotherhood, they have, as I said, powerful forces behind it, and mostly this Arabic, Arab tribes, I would say, govern at the beginning, but also Arab uh, government like Qatar, for example. Qatar is
Mhm.
fully is one of the one of the existential element of this ideology. And
Mhm.
actually, when we talk about the Turkish role, that Turkey tried to implement this idea, they get the resources, money, funding from Qatar mostly.
Mhm.
You get money from Qatar, and Turkey implement this and recruit the jihadists, train them, and try to spread this idea. And this, yeah, as I said, it has powerful actors behind it, like state. We know Egypt, like we know the Nursi in Egypt, and then we know how Erdogan took it position, and then also Hamas itself, uh, Al Qaeda, even, most of the leader, let's say, no, I mean, was Osama bin Laden was from Saudi Arabia, but people around him were all from Egypt as well. Like,
Mhm.
all were inspired by this ideology. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll talk later about Iran and the Kurds. But last week I attended a political festival in Norway, and there were like tens of thousands of people going there, and we had a stand, and I was talking to a young boy originally from Syria, and he said, why is Israel supporting terrorist groups among the Druze? And I mean, to be honest, I couldn't give him such a good answer. I know that the Druze need to defend themselves from the Islamists. So maybe you can explain why these. How do you look on these Druze groups that Israel supports? And
That's
yeah,
very good.
please.
Yeah, as liquiders, I mean, kind of how they see, in particular, uh, immigrants from Syria in Europe, how they, in to some extent, they claim they escaped from a regime that actually had the intention to kill them, destroy, probably killed many of the members. But this same the people who escaped authoritarian and a brutal regime now support another brutal regime, and
Yeah, yeah.
they live in Europe. And also we also seen in many other European countries in streets when they demonstrated uh, in favor of al-Shara, while also calling al-Shara to continue persecute these minoritized communities like Druze, the Kurds. They call them terrorists. But then I ask we have to ask ourselves, what kind of terrorist act that these people committed? The like
Mm,
al-Shara, like al-Shara regime, they did not commit any genocide. They just want kind of pluralistic Syria, in Syria where all because the reason the suffered for many years just to get rid of this authoritarian regime and to gain recognition, to live uh, to lead a life which is traditional life, and to
mm,
without worries to express the identities and and also follow the faith, which is very normal, natural all over the world. But these communities, who I mean al-Shara and people supporting him, Sunni Arabs, Sunni groups supporting him, they continuously commit genocide and call these communities as a terrorist. But we have to this is the we have to make clear that these communities are indigenous communities living in Syria. They even live in Syria before many Sunni Arab tribes who moved to Syria,
yeah.
and this they live in their own homeland. And I think it's thanks to like many Druzi, but also Kurds, they are very happy that Israel intervened and tried to save lives. And this is
Yeah.
not Israel does not actually Israel doesn't support these communities or does not intervene on its own initiative. This community is called Syria, Israel, to defend themselves because they see hope. They see that Israel. There's a, we in order to talk about this situation, we have to go back. I mean, what happened on October 7, 2023, when Hamas committed genocide, and how Israel responded to change the order, the Middle Eastern order, which was
Mm,
dominated by all this at the beginning, Iran and it's Shia, and now Turkey and its Sunni groups, radical groups, proxy groups who have like the vision to colonize the whole region. And Israel has kind of tried to change this status quo to actually to shake this order that threaten all
mm,
communities, the Druze, the Kurds, and all minoritized communities who are not Arabs, who are not Shia or Sunni. And
mm,
so what Israel does, what is in response to genocide against the Druze was welcomed and very important as a Druze community. They see hope in Israel, and actually the Kurdish people too. I would say, without hesitation. I mean, based on my observation on social media and communication with the Kurdish people on the ground, and they see the vision, the desire is very much aligned with those in Jerusalem, in Israel,
mm,
and that's why uh, the support there's a vision. But it's also very problematic that many immigrants from Syria, Sunni Arab immigrants, that they support a vision in West European countries, a vision which is against the values of in societies where they live. This kind of
mm,
contradiction, and I don't know where it will go. And this it may be dangerous in the future, like all this Sunni, let's say, this people representing this supporting terrorism of jihadists against minoritized communities, whether Druzes, Alawites, or Kurds, could be also kind of potential threat to the European and Western values, in my opinion.
mm, mm. Are there Kurds in Syria in the southwestern part, or are they all situated in the northeast?
The Kurds are in the northeast, but also in Damascus, in the like small communities in the Deir el-Zor as well, in
Hmm.
Hamas. Also the so the mostly the focus is so in the northeast, but there are many segments, small segments of the Kurds who are spread all over Syria.
Mm. So when you have had over the last few months, you have had Sunni Arab groups. Some say it's supported by the regime, or it may be regime soldiers in fights and massacres against minorities. Have the Kurds also been harmed by those attacks?
I mean, the Kurds have been permanently in fight, like against this jihadist groups and like Turkey. Until recently, there's a area close, like close to in the north at the border to Turkey. We call the Tishin Dam, where the jihadists. There are, by the way, different jihadist groups. Groups, even though they all recognize Al Shara as the leader, but there are, I mean, I talk also about Syrian National Army, which is as I at the beginning, as I mentioned, they are part of the Turkish. They are trained by Turkey. They are recruited by Turkey. They are and also mobilized by Turkey. They attacked the Kurds in Tishin, in the area of Tishin Dam, and many people were killed. And the Kurds have been permanently in the battle against this jihadists. But the issue, the Kurds, like in in so in contrast to other groups, are well organized. They have established their own military, let's say, armed forces, and the Kurds were those who actually defeated Daesh, ISIS, who
Yeah.
threatened not just Syria, Iraq, in the Middle East, but
Mm.
all world. And there were the Kurds who sacrificed over 13,000 martyrs, like people who lost their life. Over tens of thousands were injured, and many became immigrants, like they were displaced. But they are well organized, and actually, after first there was in March there was this attempt, even not attempt, there was a genocide, that massacre that the jihadist group committed against Alawite in the west coast, on the west coast, and then in Sueda, and the Kurds were the next. And it was not
Mm.
that I just guess, or that something that is not imaginary, because many elements and even many representative of Ashara regime said the Kurds will be the next, because the Kurds are the main actually inspiration for all other minoritized communities, and the
Yeah.
Kurds need to be eliminated in order to take over the control over all Syria.
So what are the most credible death numbers after Al-Sharaa took power? Do you know?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
The casualties from how many people have been killed by the new regime?
We, I mean, we don't. I mean, according to some official statistic, that over 1,700 or 2,000, some even claim 4,000 Alawites were killed by the regime,
Hmm.
just civilians. I talk about the civilians. And recently, the United Nations and many other NGOs also stressed that over 1,700 Druzzis, including children, women, elderly, patients, were killed by the regime, and
Mm.
many others who were actually disappeared, but we don't know. We don't know, but definitely large numbers. We talk about the large numbers. There are official figures, but there are also unofficial figures, and even some people talk about 20,000 Alawites who were killed by the regime forces, or let's say the elements, jihadist elements who are linked to Turkish forces, the regime
Hmm.
forces. And so definitely many people definitely have lost their life, but people who lost their life or people who were killed were mostly, not mostly, 99% from minoritized communities who don't share the world view of jihadists.
Mm. So Assad was an Alawite, and they were part of the regime until Assad fell. Do you now see like a realignment between Alawites and Kurds uniting against the new regime, or has it not come that's that far yet?
Not that, like it's now about the survival. Actually, what
Yeah.
connects them maybe the survival, because the Kurds, the Alawites, all of them are target of the new, let's say, the al-Shara regime in Damascus. But we should
Mm.
not forget that the Kurds were also victim of the Bashar regime, who was Alawite. He, until recently, over 300,000 Kurds were stripped of the citizenship. They were even no citizen. They didn't have basic right even to go to school, to buy land, and they were, Bashar regime cooperated again before 10,011 with the Turkish regime, with Erdogan regime, to persecute the Kurds, and many Kurds were displaced, and many Kurds were also killed. Many Kurds were in prison. Many lost their life in prison of Bashar. And I think the Kurds, the Kurdish community in Syria was most, let's say, the community that suffered mostly because of the Kurdish ethnicity, and uh, they are not Arabs. And Bashar, even though he is faith, let's say, Alawite, but at the end of the day, he represents a segment of Arab communities, and the Arab don't always targeted the Kurds, and regarded the Kurds as kind of threat to the Arab nationalism, this
Mhm.
pan-Arabism, and that's why. The Alawites now, they join the Kurds. This, as I said, all minorities communities see the Kurds as a kind of inspiration, because they know that the Kurds are well organized. The Kurds represent a kind of a very pluralistic, gender equal agenda in Syria. They promote all minorities communities, like the Jews, actually promoting tolerate, not just tolerating, promoting all this kind of diverse communities, whether they are multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and all. That's why many Alawites, they see the Kurds as a kind of the Kurdish model as a vision for Syria, and that's why the approach the Kurds, but also at the end of the day, they also need to survive, and the survival also connect them. That
Yeah.
applies to the Kurds and Alawite, and it's also very crucial, that a kind of anti-regime coalition, I would anti-jihadist coalition should be built, and like you know consisting of all the diverse ethnic and religious communities who are more, let's say, tending towards pluralistic society, so democratic society. And this is also very important, that all communities, despite the fact that they don't share that much in common in terms of the faith, but what connects them is kind of now survival
Mhm.
strategy. Yes.
Um, just wanna for our viewers that don't know the situation so well in Syria, I just want to share a map.
Yeah.
So the yellow areas here in the northeast, they are controlled by Kurdish forces, is it?
Correct.
So is it like uh, the the frontiers towards the regime forces are like heavily fortified? Is it like
Uh,
a military zone between them?
and not directly. I mean, there are, like, the half of Syria consists of desert,
Hmm.
and this long desert, like from Raqqa, which is the
Here.
city exactly, which is now under the control of the Kurdish, let's say, pro-Kurdish forces. When we talk about Kurdish forces, uh, they are not all Kurdish forces. There are many other groups, like Assyric, Arab tribes, Armenian groups. All of them joined the, or let's say, build the Syrian Democratic Forces. But the leading force is the Kurdish community, the Kurdish groups, troops.
Hmm.
So, and from Raqqa until Damascus, which is maybe 200 kilometers, it's almost empty land.
Hmm.
But the Kurds are, like, especially in the Rizor area at the border, which is a link, which is at border to Syria, to Iraq. The Kurds, they have, there's a river, Riva, the Euphrates River, and this river built a natural border, actually. And
Yeah.
certainly the Kurds built, the empower the forces there, because it's
Yeah.
also against Daesh. There's also
So you
large
have the
Daesh
river
group
here.
there as
Yeah.
well. Exactly, and there's a large ISIS groups also in this area, in the Rizor area, on the Arab side in particular,
Mm.
but also in the desert. So, and the Kurds also have to, yeah, like
So if it wasn't for military defense presence of Kurdish forces, then you think that Islamists would conquer the whole area.
Oh, a long time ago, and that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
battle. Like ISIS,
yeah.
most of these
And,
areas, by the way, Raqqa, Deir ez-Zor, all this, and even up to uh, like other region, like in uh, what's called I don't remember now the name, but Minbij area, for example, they were
mm,
under the control of ISIS anyways, and the Kurds defeated this and let's say freed this
mm,
region from ISIS, from Daesh, from radical jihadist groups.
mm,
And now this is the target of now even Al-Shara regime try to invade and take Raqqa and the Rizal area in particular because they claim that these regions are Arab regions, but it's not true actually. I
mm.
mean, all communities live there in somehow not in peaceful coexistence, but they live there somehow, and the Kurds live there as well. So
And these green zones, they are mostly more directly occupied by Turkish forces, is it?
Turkish forces and the Syrian National Army, which is also Turkish proxy, and that many Turkish uh, point spots are there. And even Afrin, for example, it was a traditional Kurdish city, and Turkey occupied, and they changed, they committed ethnic cleansing and displaced the Kurds, and now they are actually the most, let's say, radical jihadist groups are located in these areas. Like 2 days ago, the American, in cooperation with the Kurdish forces, they captured and eliminated the head of ISIS. And
Mm-hmm.
many people, let's say many groups who live there are as I said, radical jihadist groups, but there are also a big community from Palestinian community. Over 10,000 Palestinians live as well on the land of the Kurdish community, the Kurdish people, Afrin, which was in 2018, the Turkish forces in cooperation with all these jihadists invaded, and after 60 days, they took the city, and then they started to uh, push evacuate I mean push the Kurds away from the homeland, and now the also the official language is Turkish even. You see the extent of colonization that
Mm-hmm.
Turkey commits there, and then they claim they respect the territory sovereignty of Syria, but they violate every day actually. And and even the Afrin and all the Idlib, this region are kind of connected to the Turkish governors in Hatay, in Gaziantep. So, and they take
Mm.
the order from Turkey. I mean, even though they are cities in Syria, and the inhabitants there are not
This
Turks, but
is
yeah, yeah,
this is Afrin, isn't it? Yeah.
correct. Yeah, that was a Kurdish city and the most peaceful city before the invasion of Turkey, actually, and now it's the most dangerous city. So,
Mm. So isn't it strange that in Norway we hear a lot about Israeli occupation, but nothing about Turkish occupation? Even though Turks occupy northern Cyprus, they occupy lands in Syria, they occupy lands. They are involved in
Libya,
Libya. They are.
yeah, in many region, and Turkey, the Turkish policy is very dangerous. But of course, we also we know that Turkey has permanently occupied the land of others. We also know from Ottoman Empire and all the until today, and it's not just about occupation, but how they changed the demography, how the remove the everything that relate that let's say justify the indigeneity
Mhm,
or indigenous communities. So, and Turkey pursue very, let's say, sophisticated colonial policy
mhm,
to not just to, like, in West Bank and in many areas, even though the Palestinian they get the, I mean, we can never compare even with the situation with those in this area. I mean, uh,
mhm,
they are free, they have the education, they speak the language, and the actually when they are not involved in any violent attacks, they are kind of also promoted. But when in
mhm,
Turkey, in I mean in Syria, in Afrin, in this region, the only let's say the only crime that the Kurds have, that they are kind of different ethnic communities, and for Turkey they are the potential target, and they should be eliminated from the Turkish point
mm.
of view.
So the Palestinians declared their own state in 1988, even though they weren't controlling any territory. The Kurdish people now, for a long time, controlled northern Iraq. They control uh, northeast of Syria. Do you see uh, a future that where a Kurdish state is declared?
I mean, this is, in the Middle East, you don't know what tomorrow could happen.
Yeah.
It's very unpredictable. But I think it's also not just about the whole situation. It's also relevant to emphasize the Kurdish agency, the Kurdish leadership. I mean, in
Mm.
Kurdistan region of Iraq, in the northern, they call it northern Iraq, but the Kurdistan region of Iraq and the government, they decided the referendum in 2017. That was the step forward towards the independence, but with Turkey, Iran, and forces in Baghdad, build a coalition to prevent the Kurds, and they claim that they will not allow the second Israel. The Kurds. I mean, I don't know why they always refer. Of course, I know. I can imagine why they always refer to Israel when the Kurds demands their rights, and to also try to implement or enact their rights, because yeah, the Israel for them is kind of the demonize Israel, the attack the Israel, and whoever is connected with Israel will
Hmm.
be in the same status, and the Kurds will be then and are therefore demonized, and and the Kurds, but still it's not just about the position of those, let's say, colonizing the Kurdish land, whether the Turkey, whether Iran, or Arab states, let's say, including Syria. So it's also about the Kurdish unity. I mean, it is not unity, but also the vision. Also, in my opinion, the Kurdish leadership is still kind of like, you know, uh, not well united,
Hmm.
fragmented still. The vision is very diverse. The Kurds, the demand different, they have different objective. They have different vision. The Kurds in Syria, they want something else than the Kurds in Iraq, and even not within the Kurds of Iraq. In Iraq, there's different parties. They have totally different partnership, different objective, and so it's also very important to look at this challenge. So intra-Kurdish community challenge, I would say, and
Mm.
but it is, at the end of the day, it's not nobody knows what tomorrow could happen in the Middle East.
Yeah.
It's very likely, and also in the condition, the international community needs to be also ready for it, and it's also American. I mean, I think whatever happens, it should be also communicated with American, because they have the control over the region, and in many cases they are also not that much positive towards an independence of Kurdistan right now. But whether in a month, whether this may change in a month or in 2 months or in a year, we don't know.
Mm.
But the Kurds still, the 90% of the Kurdish population. I'm not talking about the Kurdish leadership, in whether in Iraq or in Syria or in Turkey. I'm talking about the Kurdish population. And when I just see, when on social media, when someone interviewed them, all of them, they say, we have sacrificed our sons and daughters just for independence. We want our own state. When you look at the narrative, the rhetoric of the leadership, it's there's no correlation. And I mean, the leadership has, of course, also responsibility. And whenever the Kurds talk about the Kurdish right, let alone the Kurdish state, Turkey immediately, on the one side, mobilized its military to intervene, to commit genocide, and the Kurds went through this many times ago. And the Kurds, Iran on the other side as well, the Arab and jihad is now the proxy. This is one of the main challenge, but also the Kurds are landlocked, where, I mean, they don't have access to sea. And
Mm.
it's very important, like, if there's a corridor from Kurdish region in Syria to Israel, this is something some call the David corridors, even though this isn't something that is really not that much discussed in Israel. The Kurds called Salahuddin corridor. I wrote a paper on peace in Jerusalem Post and called it Abraham Peace Corridor, how you create a peace in all region to connect Israel, Kurds, Iraq, all over to Iran. But there are many challenges.
Mm. Um, the Kurdistan Workers' Party (PKK) they declared an end to their armed struggle few months ago. What was the background behind that, and does that mean that the kind of the the conflict between the Ankara regime and the Kurds in Turkey have kind of been reduced?
PKK has not just declared the end of its armed struggle, but also it decided to dissolve itself. And the also officially PKK does not exist
Mhm.
right now. On 9 May 9th, they decided that they organized the Congress and declared that they dissolved themselves. The reason, there are multiple reasons. As of from the, I mean, from the point of viewpoint of the Kurds, I mean, they cannot, win the armed struggle that they started many years ago uh, against Turkey, and it's also not necessary because they started the armed struggle, let's say, officially in 1984 to actually force the Turkish state to recognize the Kurdish identity, and the
Mhm.
Turkey recognize the Kurdish identity, but not has not solved, and it doesn't Turkey doesn't have any interest to solve it.
Mhm.
This is one of the from many course think like this, but for many others, it's the Turkish demands because Turkey actually negotiated with Öcalan, Abdullah Öcalan, who was in prison, who in prison of Turkey for 27 years, living in solitary confinement. Sorry, and he negotiated with the Turkey, but many criticized that Öcalan just agreed on what Turkey imposed on him, and many even believe that Öcalan is a kind of hostage, like many hostage, Israeli hostage in the hand of Hamas. They have
Mhm.
they don't have will to say what they want to say,
Mhm.
and as soon as they are free, then they tell what they want to tell, what they experience. They talk about the barbaric acts of Hamas, and Öcalan is in the hand of the Turkeys like hostage, and nobody has access to Öcalan. Nobody knows exactly what Öcalan knows, what's going on outside, and but Turkey use it in a way it serves its own interest, Turkish interest, to
Mhm.
eliminate the Kurdish voices in the Middle East and to eliminate it. And now they try to they call it integration for the Kurds in Turkey, but also in Syria. The Kurds, they have to integrate into the the vision that Turkey fights for it, or Turkey tries to implement. As I said at the beginning, the Ummah, the Ottoman Empire, that the Kurds should be eliminated, should Kurdish ethnicity shouldn't be that relevant. Even 2 3 days ago, there was in as part of this so-called, the Turkey call it the terror-free process, because they call it the Kurdish question and Kurdish people as terrorists. And now when they give up the arms, they are now they free the Turkey from terrorists, so they don't use
Mhm.
the arms anymore. And the Turkey within the framework of this, let's say this process, I don't know how we to identify it, is also definitely not peace process. And Turkey, they build the kind of uh, let's say working group in the Turkish parliament, and they listen to the Kurdish, let's say, victim, and then some Kurdish women, mothers. They started talking Kurdish. They prevented them. They didn't allow them to speak Kurdish. How can
Mhm.
you talk about integration? It's just so the solution of PKK is for the Turkey is just to eliminate the Kurdish voices and the Kurdish demands, but also for the Kurds it's important that they try to shift the armed struggle into a democratic, let's say, democratic venues, to use democratic means. But unfortunately, no. There are no any conditions in Turkey, democratic conditions, that you can really be engaged democratically and represent, your community, present your community, and enact your identities.
Mhm.
So, and but the course in Rojava, like this in Syria, in northeast Syria, they have totally different agenda. They are not part of this process. They are not part of the PKK, and they are not part, and they don't. They have never used guns against Turkey.
Mhm.
Only when Turkey invaded. But Turkey tried to also attack them every day, threaten them. Hakan Fidan yesterday or day before yesterday, again, he made his own threat. The Kurds should now give up everything and in Syria and
Mhm.
integrate into, can you imagine, jihadist regime? Even, they don't even shake the women's hands, and now they want the embrace the Kurdish
Mhm.
woman fighter. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
And
yeah. In let's turn now to Iran. And I read recently that after the war in June, the Iranian regime had arrested more than 20,000 people. So I was wondering how this crackdown has affected the Kurdish minority in Iran. Maybe
Yeah,
you could
we know.
speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. The Kurds were the first target. Many were also executed because for them, for the Iranian regime, the Kurds are spying for Israel. The also many of the Kurds who were executed were also accused of being spying for Israel. That was
Mm.
the crime. It is. It doesn't
Do
make
you know,
sense.
do you know
So
how many have been executed since June?
I don't know exactly the number,
Mm,
but I know a large number. I
mm,
know, and I know that over 1,000 Kurds were arrested. Uh, so, as part of the crackdown that regime has started, since its let's say defeat. You know, by Israel. So and for this, but definitely even not just the Kurds have permanently been a target of the Iranian regime, and it's not just that this crackdown started recently since the 12 days wars, and before even we know the Gina Amini, the Kurdish woman who were executed in 2022, uh, and she was the inspiration, or she was, let's say, she started actually the Xinjiang Azadi movement. That women were equalized with life and freedom. So, and even before, the Kurds have permanently been at odds with the Iranian regime, always fighting. There are many Kurdish armed organization as well who, in different way, resist the Iranian regime, and the
mm,
Kurds are potential for now. Even in Iran, the Kurds and maybe to some extent Baluchis are the forces that are actually considered as serious because they are organized armed forces, and that's why they are mostly I would say the target of the regime.
mm. Do you think that a regime change may happen within the last next 2 or 3 years?
I mean, it's very hypothetical, but I definitely believe the regime change will happen at some point. It
Mm,
may happen within weeks or months or years. I don't know. I cannot predict it, but
no.
this is very likely because I mean, it's not just, and even without intervention, outside intervention, because
Mm,
the regime has, exploited the resources that belong to Iranians. Uh, for years, and all these resources were used, were provided to Hamas, to Hezbollah, and many other jihadists in Houthis in Yemen, and that was the resources that actually belong to the people in Iran.
mm,
And but so Iran exploit them, exploit these resources, neglect its population, and it's never ever responded to any of the needs. And even now, we know that there are many problems. Even there's like many talk about shortcoming of water, that people don't have proper drinking water, for example, and
mm,
the everything's extremely expensive. Inflation is kind of, I don't know how many 100% is kind of in the process. So,
mm,
and it is the matter of time when, and I think the Kurdish forces are pioneering. Will pioneer this struggle because the Kurds have always been organized and resisted this regime, like they also did in 90. So recently, this with the Xinjiang Azadi movement, and they permanently have been leading the opposition as well.
mm,
Unfortunately, there are also, let's say, challenges like from opposition, like Pahlawani, pro Shah, the sons of Reza Pahlavi, and the people, the groups linked to this segment are extremely anti-Kurdish. I mean,
mm,
and they don't want to even hear the Kurdish voices. In diaspora, we see that also they are in diaspora anyways, organized. They don't have any influence in Iran or on Iranian people, but
mm,
we try to criminalize the Kurds in the same way as regime does, Mullah
mm,
regime does. This so I mean, and also the Iranian opposition in general are, I mean, not united.
mm,
Maybe this is also why probably a collapse of regime or regime change may take longer, because of the lack of organized united opposition. And
Yeah.
there are, and I think, in my opinion, to some extent, the regime also tried to worsen this relationship within the opposition. So,
Mm.
and it does, but at the end of the day, I think it will happen, but I don't know when. It's maybe
Yeah.
one day we will wake up and then hear, oh wow, regime, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like Bashar regime as well, that regime collapsed, and then this is very likely.
Mm. So, finally, last question: how would you say that? So you lived in Israel for 6 years? Was it four?
Four and a half,
Four and a half
almost.
years. How do you see Israeli society changed after 7th of October?
Of course, a lot. I mean,
Mm.
since October 7, you can see how people are sad, how people, feel lonely, feel um, mistreated, and whenever you wake, so whenever you wake up, I mean, when you go on the street and you see the image of hostages, and this is the pain, and but
Mm.
also when you see on social media, and many friends in Israel, my Israeli friends, they tell me all the time why the world is against them. You see all this demonstration
Yeah.
against Israel, demonizing the Jewish people in general, attacking the Jewish synagogue. And this is something that has a negative implication, that the people feel like they are lonely, kind of, and actually very unfairly treated. And many people in the West, they don't even know what's going on in Israel, how the Israeli people, society suffered, and started on October 7 when Hamas, massacred thousands of people and took hostage. And even I mean, the kids, 3, 4, 5 months, all the kids were burnt alive by Hamas when they attacked the October on October 7.
Yeah.
In kibbutz, so, and but the unfortunately the 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 public, the world public, does not see, or does not want to see, or maybe does not know what happened, and they are victim of manipulation, propaganda, often supported, probably also manufactured by Iran, by Turkey, and all this kind of nefarious forces. And when the Israelis see this, when they see all this the hostile demonstration against them, they feel extremely traumatized, and they are traumatized anyways. I mean, I'm not from Israel, but I live there, and when I attend the conferences, in recently I attend 2 months ago, I attended a conference in London
Mm.
at LSE, and I just realized how people were hostile to me. And then at the front of the conference, which was not linked to um, Palestinian issue or Israel issue, they just came some, let's say, mostly Turkish scholar in front of the in front of the audience, and condemned Israel for genocide. When I call them, but why you don't condemn the Hamas atrocities, genocide? Hamas
Mm.
started genocide; he killed civilians. This kind of anti-Semitism, it's something that actually boosts this traumatization, and I feel very sad for it. But as someone who's not from Israel, I live in Israel, as I told you at the beginning. Uh,
Mm.
Actually, the hospitality, the friendship, the warmth relationship, and being invited almost every Friday evening to Shabbat dinner are indication that they are really not exclusive community. They are inclusive, and that gives me a sense of belonging, sense of living in my own homeland. And
Mm.
so, and I mean, they want to tell people they are, and often also witness at the Shabbat dinner, even that even Palestinian joined the Shabbat dinner, and with Israelis, they talk about how to solve this issue.
Mm.
And many, I heard from many, we don't understand this Europeans what they want from us.
Yeah.
If they really want to solve our issue, they should support us. But none of them were here, and then they try to, worsen, to drive a wedge between us. It
Mm.
doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't help our cause, neither Palestinian nor Israelis. But Israeli, as I said, they just need peace. We talk about many issues, and also when we talk about Israel, Israel has also performed as regional power. Israel is a force of actually change in the Middle East, the status quo. And since the establishment of Israel in 1948, Israel has been in war, always fighting. But despite all this challenges, Israel has achieved everything. I would say not everything, almost everything, but only one thing they didn't get is peace. They just want peace.
Mm.
I just hear from people on the street every day. They just want peace, and they said we also know the Israeli policy how they were ready to offer land for peace. We saw that in Egypt, in Sinai, and many other regions,
Mm.
even in Oslo during Oslo negotiation, for example. But
Mm.
unfortunately, the anti-Semitism is something that makes people much more feel much more traumatized and very sad.
Mm. Veysi, thanks a lot for joining us. And all the best.
So I thank
Shabbat,
you, Konrad.
Shabbat Shalom.
Yeah, I thank you, Konrad,
And
for having
Litot.
me.
Bye bye.
Thanks. Shabbat shalom. Bye bye.
That was